I'm freaking exhausted. I don't know about you. I don't know if you feel the same way. And I want to talk about burnout and diabetes burnout and just burnout in general. Maybe it's the holidays. Maybe it's just this particular year, but I just feel absolutely smoked. And of course, it's not just diabetes, right? There's all the different factors going on right now. It's the holidays, it's colder weather, there's stress from professional things, there's stress from personal life, there's stress from social life, and it all just kind of converges. And again, maybe it's just me. I get messages periodically that will say, hey, Ben, I am just absolutely just decimated. Diabetes is wrecking everything. I'm burnt out. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to do anything. How do I get through this situation? And trust me, I get it. Like I've had this now for 25 years and change. And it's not like, oh, every year it gets easier. Like to an extent, yes, you would hope that if you're willing to make the improvements, it will get a little bit easier. But on the flip side, welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode. What is going on? Welcome to this episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast. And in this one, happy almost New Year, which is insane to say, absolutely insane to say. And of course, I could go into all the New Year stuff. Oh, set your goals. No, we'll get into that soon enough. And I would just start thinking about it. If you haven't already, start marinating on it. What do you want to see different come 2025 versus what you've experienced in 2024? And truly reflect on it, right? Was 2024 the type of year that you expected it to be or wanted it to be? And if it was, why? And if not, also why? But I don't want to talk about that stuff today. Everybody's thinking about that right now. I want to talk about burnout and diabetes burnout and just burnout in general, because I'm freaking exhausted. I don't know about you. I don't know if you feel the same way. And maybe it's the holidays. Maybe it's just this particular year, but I just feel absolutely smoked. And of course, it's not just diabetes, right? There's all the different factors going on right now. It's the holidays, it's colder weather, there's stress from professional things, there's stress from personal life, there's stress from social life, and it all just kind of converges. And again, maybe it's just me, but I am just absolutely smoked. And I know that there are people, I get messages periodically that will say, hey, Ben, I am just absolutely just decimated. Diabetes is wrecking everything. I'm burnt out. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to do anything. How do I get through this situation? And trust me, I get it. Like I've had this now for 25 years and change. And it's not like, oh, every year it gets easier. Like to an extent, yes, you would hope that if you're willing to make the improvements, it will get a little bit easier. But on the flip side, there's also the possibility that it just straight up doesn't. I always tell people that it will get easier if you're willing to put just a little bit of effort and a little bit of time into it. It will get a lot easier, like way simpler. But when you are burnt, whether you're a diabetes veteran, whether you're a diabetes newbie, you're going to feel burnout at some point. And it can last, it can last a day, it can last a week, it can last months if you're not careful. So I think some of it, and from my perspective, right, obviously this is just my insight from my own perspective. And then of course, from, the overall consensus of people that my team and I have worked with, I think the big thing with it is it always starts with one thing. And that one thing just kind of starts to snowball and avalanche from there, if we're going to use that as a metaphor, right? Like it's always one incident. Maybe you have a bad pump site. You're on an insulin pump, you have a bad site, or you just straight up completely butcher a carb counting situation where you're like, I'm at this restaurant, I'm trying to figure this out. I think it's 35. And it turns out that the real number was probably 95. And suddenly your blood sugar shot up. It's super high. It's hard to get down. It's a stubborn high. You're exhausted. You're tired. You don't want to deal with it. You fight through it. And then usually from there, you have your one incident, right? And it's always a few of them in close proximity. Then you have another one. Maybe it's the next day. You have a nasty low, or the next day you have another high, or maybe the next day was the bad pump site. Whatever it is, you always, to me, and maybe this is just me, right? But there's always a couple that are in quick succession. One of the easiest things I would say, for an example of it's not diabetes related, would be us people living in Florida. We had the Helene come through, and then usually, you're prepping for this hurricane. And I feel like this is a very viable comparison because Hurricanes are super stressful, right? You don't know where it's going. There's all these different paths. There's all these different models. You don't know what's about to happen. And you're getting prepared as best as you can. And I can usually handle like one big one per year because your stress is probably close to a 10 out of 10 because you don't know what's going on. Do you have to evacuate? Do you have to leave? What's going on? And then we had the first one hit. We're like, all right, cool. We made it through. Thankfully, we're okay. And then less than 2 weeks later was Milton. And that to me was, honestly, that's what really kickstarted, if we're going to be real, that's what kickstarted a lot of the just feeling just absolutely devoured by life, if I'm going to give a lack of a better analogy. But for me personally, but with that, right, you have another one less than 2 weeks later. Same thing in diabetes, right? You have that nasty meal with the super high, and then really close after you have a nasty pump site that just doesn't work. Or you had that other situation. So now you've been beat up twice and you're trying to figure it out. You're in the boxing ring, you're trying to, regain your ground and not, fall over and basically get knocked out. And then there might be another little thing. But then the thing is, it's a little thing then, right? You have two, moderate to big things. And then you have a little thing, a little annoying thing. Oh, I had a low blood sugar right in the middle of this meeting. Or, oh, I got really annoyed because I had to, I don't know, I'm trying to lose weight and I had to eat something that I didn't want to have to eat because my number went low. It's always something little. And that little thing is just kind of that straw that breaks the camel's back. And you're like, you know what? F this, I'm done. And I've seen it where people just throw everything out the window. They just punt it. They say, the hell with it. I'm done. I'm not trying at all. And I have seen weeks, I legitimately have seen from people's blood sugar reports where you can tell the week they were burned out because you'll see, oh, look, their average is 142, their average is 130. And then the week they're burned out, their average is 187. And then they come back down, hopefully within the next week. But the thing is, it happens to all of us. It's that first thing that's, relatively mild. Maybe it's moderate. Then you have another thing in close proximity. And there's always, another one. And it just kind of feels like they're just going and going. And a couple of things I want to bring up about this, because you will experience it if you have not already. One thing is, and I know I'm a pretty big mindset person, but the whole law of attraction thing, right? That you get the energy that you put out. If you are constantly, holy cow, everything sucks, diabetes hates me, it's the worst thing in the whole wide world, you're probably going to attract more of that into your life. And, maybe call me a woo-woo weirdo. I don't really care. But it's one of those things where if you're like, oh, my blood sugar sucks, or, oh, my sight's going to be terrible this time because my last one was bad, you're more likely to have that happen. Those self-fulfilling prophecies do happen. I mean, my goodness, I'm the scar tissue king over here, right? With putting in sites. There are times where I'm like, oh God, here we go. Site change day. Can't wait to put in 3. And sure enough, how many sites did I have to put in that day to get one of them to work? 3. Because I literally put that into the universe and the universe gave me back exactly what it thought I wanted, which was not quite the case. So I really will say the positive thinking, the positive vibes, the being willing to say, hey, this has been really challenging, but I'm going to do my absolute damnedest to reframe it as best as I can is going to do you wonders in the grand scheme of living with diabetes, especially when it comes to avoiding burnout, because you have to think of burnout like this vortex, right? You have one incident that happens, you have another incident that happens, you have another one that kind of breaks you, and then you're like, F it. And you just go into this vortex of nastiness that takes a while to get out of. And I think the best way to not have to deal with it is to not get in there in the first place. So if you can say, okay, this really sucked. I undercounted these carbs at this meal, or my site didn't do well, or, whatever it might have been, right? I forgot my dose at lunch, whatever it might have been. Then if you can reframe it immediately after, you're going to prevent yourself from getting into that situation in the first place. You're going to not have to think about, oh my goodness, what's about to happen next? It's all right, cool. I had an incident that happened. What happened? Cool. I know what I did. I forgot my dose. Next time I'm going to set an alarm. Boom, done. And then you just reframe it. Okay, yeah, you feel like garbage. It goes back to that acknowledge, respond, move on that I've talked about, the ARM method when it comes to blood sugars that are less than optimal, right? Acknowledge what happened, respond to what happened and make it better, and then move on with your life. But I think a lot of times when life is beating you from different directions, and it's not just diabetes, there's other things in there too. Maybe your kids are, acting up or something's going on. You have to travel or a family member's causing drama. That just adds to it and it just amplifies what's going on from a diabetes standpoint so that it makes it feel even worse than it actually may be. So put that in perspective too, really stopping and saying like, okay, this is what happened. Let's roll. Let's make this happen. That's going to be pivotal when it comes to preventing burnout from happening in the first place, is just being able to say, I'm not going to allow it to start because one thing happened. I'm not going to just put that out there to allow it to happen again. And then even if it does, again, being willing to reframe it and reframe it quick. Because the key with this is being quick about it. If you let it sit there, simmer, fester, whatever word you want to use, that's going to then lead to a higher likelihood of this burnout. Now, the next thing too, I will say, another way to, ideally prevent the burnout besides, okay, we're taking the right moves, slow down a little bit. And this time of year, it can be really tricky to do that. But slowing down makes a huge difference. And it could be everything in life, but especially on the diabetes front. Maybe you're just running through because you've got a million things. I got this work meeting. Oh, I got this call. Oh, I got this. And you start to put diabetes on the back burner. So then when something does inevitably happen, it feels 10 times worse when you realize if you stop for a second, you say, yeah, you know what? I really haven't been paying that much attention to it. So it's no wonder something more likely is to happen, right? It's the equivalent of you're cooking something in the kitchen. You've got grease all over, you've got, crumbs, you got all sorts of stuff going on. And then the stove suddenly lights up in flames because you weren't paying complete attention because it's a grease fire now because you didn't realize that there was stuff all over the stove as you were cooking, right? It's the same kind of thing. You're kind of just leaving it back there, letting it do its thing. Whoosh, it just burst into flames. And now you're upset because you kind of neglected it for a little while. So again, it's the prevention aspect. It's slow down a little bit. What can I do to fix this? And then how can I reframe what is going on? You're not going to make chicken shit into chicken salad, right? You're not going to take this dreadful, oh man, my blood sugar is 316. You're not going to be able to spin that into a beautiful thing. But on the flip side, what you can do is say, okay, how am I going to reframe this to get my number down, but then also to prevent this from happening yet again? Because once, like I said, once you get in that vortex, once you get in that spiral, it's just not going to go well. And it takes a while to dig out of it. So those would be two of the things, right? Another thing would be is if you feel like you're in that mode, and again, it's not likely just individually the diabetes, but if you're in that mode, what is something you enjoy, right? What is something that brings you joy, that gets you happy and genuinely, not just like, oh yeah, this is cool. I went and I don't know, I did this activity for 20 minutes and kind of half-heartedly did. No, like what is something that genuinely brings you joy and makes you happy? Whether it's, chatting with one of your friends, hanging out, doing something. I think something that you are able to be fully engaged and present, that mindfulness aspect of things will be imperative because again, what does that do? It does two things, right? Number one, it brings your vibe up. It brings your emotions up. And because you are so present, you cannot focus on whatever's going on in diabetes land. And maybe that may be difficult this time of year to carve out that time, but there's got to be something for 15 or 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. You're like, hey, this is great. And maybe your thing is, hey, I'm going to decompress and, watch a show. But I would try to do something that's going to truly bring you happiness instead of just, oh, I'm just going to tune out everything else in the world. Because if you're just putting everything in the world on pause, that's nice, but it doesn't really solve anything. Versus if you're like, hey, I'm putting everything in the world on pause, but I'm doing something and I'm engaged in something that I actually enjoy. That, again, and maybe it's just me, but that really feels like a massive difference that can have a real seismic shift in terms of how you're feeling about things in that moment. And the ultimate goal of this is how can we bring your vibe up? If you're starting to notice it dropping, how can we bring it up to get you back into a better spot where you're able to prevent the burnout from happening? And trust me, it's normal. There are times I want nothing to do with my diabetes. I don't want to care about it. I talk about it all day, every day. I see it all day, every day. I have it myself. It gets really to be a lot after a while. And I would absolutely be lying if I told you anything different, right? It's a lot. You don't get a break from it. And especially in my situation, it's the life I chose. But on the flip side, there's a reason why I feel like I was more burnt out growing up than I am right now. And that's because it's kind of, you're paying attention to it. You're doing your thing. You're tending the garden per se, but you're also not hyper fixated on it because that will also lead to some of it. And on the flip side, not just being not hyper fixated, but also not just neglecting it either. You have to kind of keep that middle ground. Oh, you don't want your number lower than 70. You don't want it higher than, really 150, but higher than 130. Like it's a similar kind of thing. You don't want to overdo it and drive yourself nuts, but you also don't want to not pay attention and then have the consequences come later on as well. So recognize that from a burnout perspective too, is again, it's going to happen this time of year. It may happen more likely than others. Also, if you're living in a cold weather climate, the seasonal effect, I don't know, I know it's the acronym is SAD and it basically means you're not getting sunlight and it's dark early and it's depressing, but that can also contribute to it as well. So I really think, when it comes to everything, right, there's a million things. Okay, you got to do this for your diabetes and that and dose and exercise and food and all that, right? Make it a little slower, chill out on it a little bit. Say, hey, what do I got to do? What's got to happen? How can I acknowledge, respond, move on if something's not optimal? And most importantly, how can I up-level my mindset? How can I increase the vibe and feel better about things and just prevent that spiral from happening in the first place? And if you get to that spiral, you obviously have to have something that can get you out. Activities, mindfulness, etc. will. The stuff I mentioned before will. But another thing that I truly believe every single person with diabetes needs is an ability, an outlet for mental health, right? I think whether it's a therapist, whether it's, whether someone goes to hypnotherapy, whether it's just someone that understands, that can listen and give you insight and actually help, I think would be absolutely pivotal if you are in that situation. The community is a beautiful place for that. The Diabetes Online community is amazing. Plenty of different forums where people can go vent and say, hey, this is what's going on. It's really frustrating. And the beauty of it is people will have your back. People will go in there and say, hey, I know exactly what it's like. I've been there. It sucks. It's horrible. But you know what? It is okay, because you will get through this. It will be tough, but you will get through it. You will feel awesome. And you will get out on the other side. And sometimes that's all you need to push yourself up, increase that vibe, and make yourself feel better. And that's really the beauty of this community. And of course, if you're like, hey, I want a one-on-one therapist, I'm also fully in support of that. I think every person with diabetes and without diabetes, for that matter, would benefit from some sort of therapy to work through things and make sure that you're in a better spot and able to be the best version of you that you can be. But with that is my rant on burnout. I'm hoping you're not experiencing it now, but I do hope that some tidbits from this can help you the next time you do end up in a potential burnout-like situation. So if you got something from this, let me know. Shoot me a message over on social media on Instagram or TikTok at manofzl, MANOFTZL. And with that, of course, as well, if you're like, hey, I really want some support on the blood sugars. I want that safety net. I want that roadmap to show me, hey, I'm going to have my numbers in a great spot and I can live life and not feel burnt out. And diabetes just feels like it's easy. My team and I are here to help. We're all dietitians. We all live with diabetes ourselves, and we may even take your insurance, which is awesome. So with that, let me know how we can support you, and I will see you in the next episode.
Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.